Good morning, everybody on YouTube. It's Sunday morning. I'm highly caffeinated, and I think the rest of my crew is mostly caffeinated, or at least getting there. So thank you all for joining me on this discussion about The Thing. So let me introduce my panelists in no particular order. Here is a kind of a late edition of this panel. He didn't actually make it onto the poster because, silly me, I didn't realize he was a big fan of horror movies in general. But we have some Norwegian representation with Mr. Jace.
Hello.
How you doing? Hello.
Or hi, folkens.
Hi. We have the lovely purple Valkyrie, so it's not a complete sausage fest.
Good morning. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday, yes.
We have Mr. Grimm.
Hello.
We don't know if he's a dog or not, actually.
Or maybe he's the thing.
Maybe he's the thing.
Could be.
Could be.
We have Esh.
Yo.
Now, in all honesty, guys, I did make Esh watch both films before he could be on this panel. So
Yeah.
he did his homework, and I said, "Okay, good boy, you get to be on the panel." We have Mr. Gary, who may not actually be here at the moment. I think he's.
I'm here.
Is he? Okay. He's getting he's got his caffeine. He's all right. And for the first time on my show ever, I'm very happy to introduce Mr. Snowdub.
I don't want to talk anymore, Fuchs. I just want to get up to my shack and get drunk.
There you go. There you go.
Morning.
Esh
Sings! And it started out with a good quote.
All right. Well, I should probably start this off by saying spoilers, but I mean, Jesus, it's been over like what, 30 years, 40 years? If you haven't seen this film by now, I can't spoil it for you.
It came out in 1982, so
Yeah.
Hey, I watched it for the first time like a month ago, so. Yeah.
There you go. Ash, you have some controversial opinions on that too. I will try to keep the rest of the panel from just tearing into you over
To be honest, these days, when do I not have controversial opinions?
Oh, actually, I don't think you're totally alone though. I think Jace has a lot of sympathy for you. I think he's actually got some similar feelings too, and maybe it's just a thing for the younger generation. But yeah, I mean, we're here mostly to talk about John Carpenter's The Thing, the 1982 release. Which was actually made in 1981 because it was made right after Escape from New York, which was made right after the Elvis movie with Kurt Russell and John Carpenter. But we will definitely be mentioning the prequel, the 2011 The Thing, which,
of course.
I don't know. I mean, I guess the first thing I got to ask is kind of like, I wonder if that was a bad idea to title the prequel The Thing, because almost everybody I have talked to was like, oh, I didn't watch the 2011 one because I thought it was a remake.
Yes, that's the thing with me. Like, today was the first time I actually watched the prequel because I thought it was a remake many years ago. But it wasn't. And I have to say that I really love the Norwegian actors because they have a lot of Norwegian actors. Two of my favorite Norwegian actors are in the movie.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons I was kind of glad to get you here because I figured, okay, you're going to have more input on the 2011 one because of the Norwegian angle on it.
Yeah.
Okay, Ash has only got about an hour, so we'll have to work with him on that. But all right, well, I gotta go with let's go with first impressions about the two films. I think for me, I originally saw The Thing. As I was a latchkey kid, so I would come home. We were fortunate enough to have cable back then, and they would be showing The Thing on HBO or Showtime or something, and that was my first time to watch something like that. And I remember initially, like, I was just stunned because it was so bloody and so gory, especially as you've seen from the opening credits for this thing. I mean, that was my first impression of it as a child, so I really didn't get into the nuances of it as much back then. But even then, I mean, just the kind of foreboding, sinister nature of the film itself was, pretty strongly presented to an impressionable youngster like myself. I don't know. What do y'all think? I guess we should go around. Jace is muted, so Purple.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, I've got to admit, one of my favorite horror movies. I love the special effects. I love what Stan Winston Studios did with the animatronics. I think it really ramps up the horror to have these practical effects shown on screen. It is a tightly directed film. It's fast-paced. It's got a great cast. And you actually come to care about these characters, which is very rare.
I am back. I just my food came, so I'm just going to mute a little bit. So
I do want to point out that it was Winston Studios only did the dog kennel scene. It was Rob Bottin who did the rest of the effects for the film. But Winston did kill it with the dog kennel scene. It was nuts.
Yeah,
it really was. Yeah, it was. And it's one of the most memorable scenes, I think.
We'll get to that. I'm going to ask that too. Grim, what do you think?
First time I saw it, I was fairly young, and my dad got it rented on home video, I think. So, yeah, good parenting. I think it's probably the closest we've gotten to a properly Lovecraftian visual effect. And I think it's lasted so long in large part because of the physical effects that were used. Whereas the prequel, it kept taking me out of it because the CGI was too obvious. But that sort of physicality was really important. And I think of Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, it's the only one that's played entirely straight. It's not the other ones. They have a certain cast or a subjectivity to them, whereas the Thing is just here it is. I think that's what makes it so effective and horrifying, perhaps compared to the others, though you understand why he made that kind of choice. So I was a fan from the start, really.
Yeah,
I remember Escape from New York was part of that trilogy. What was the third one?
It was actually at Mouth of Madness, The Thing, and Prince of Darkness.
Yeah.
Oh man!
First time I watched the movie, I think I was like 10 or something, and I watched it with my dad. And I just I love aliens. I love horror, and so I just I loved the first one. Just give me 2 seconds here.
Sure.
That was really spicy. I'm so sorry. The prequel. Well, the reason I kind of like that more is more of because of Norwegian actors, especially 2 of them. Because one of the actors is like one of my childhood heroes. So he used to be on a show called Jonny og Johanna. It's a really child show, but so that's why I kind of like that more with the actors. But the first one, better effects, everything was better. It's not like the CGI in the prequel was, it drags you out a little bit because it's too much CGI. The first one has, more beautiful practical effects, and it looked better, it looked nicer, and the story was a little bit better.
Okay. Snow, what do you think?
How am I sounding? Still messing with my mic a little bit.
No, you sound good.
Okay, great. So this is first impressions. Well, I was broken real bad. Like it came out in 82, so it must have been 83. I was about 5 years old. I'm not trying to date myself here, but it got rented as a video. The whole family was downstairs in the rec room. It got put in as a recommendation by the uncle. I don't think he knew what we were getting into. So my first impression of The Thing, I actually didn't really watch it as much as I listened to it, because I was constantly throwing a blanket over my head from all the scary scenes. So it was actually a very visceral moment listening to the thing more than I was actually watching it. And so shout out to the sound effects, by the way, and the great music. So the thing has a lot of great impressions on me, and that's just my original one, but I'm sure we'll get into it more. As far as the prequel, I'll nod my head to, the fact that they tried. But I remember following that really closely, and they were supposed to keep the special effects practical, and then last minute they turned it CGI, which completely ruined the film. That said, I do appreciate some of the storyline and the fact I love the last 10 minutes of that movie and how well it lines up to Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah.
So it's a love-hate relationship with that prequel.
Yeah, I was talking to Jace about that earlier, and that's one thing I think both of us really love is the fact that the way that the prequel ends, it dovetails into John Carpenter's The Thing so well that you can literally transition from one film to the next immediately. And
that is so well done. Like, I've not seen someone do that so perfectly. It's just like, that's one of the high points with the whole prequel, to be honest.
It is. Gary?
Yeah.
What's your first impressions of The Thing when you first saw it? I mean,
Well, I was 18, and I would see it in a theater. It was the second R-rated movie I got to go see without my dad, and Blade Runner.
We'll talk about that tonight.
Yeah. Blade Runner and The Thing are my two number one and number two favorite films of all time.
Mine too.
Because they had such an impact on me, not just because my dad wasn't there with me, but because 1982 is a heavily influential year in cinema.
Yes.
And there are several films that impacted on how, still to this day, I do my own writing. And even when I'm doing artwork, you'll catch nods to Blade Runner and The Thing in a lot of the comics I do. And so The Thing just had this major impact on me. And unlike Alien, I didn't see the facehugger scene until I was almost 20, because I closed my eyes when I saw that when I was 14, and finally rented it on VHS and saw the facehugger scene, and I was like, you fag, why'd you shut your eyes? You're such an asshole. And, self-mocking. But I went into The Thing eyes wide open, and that movie was just stunning. What Carpenter did with scenes where several guys are standing around a table, and how he shot that is so instructive to anybody who wants to shoot tight scenes with a lot of people. Because that could have absolutely been awful, how they shot that, but he went for tight shots and then full shots, tight shot and then full shot. And he focused a lot in his storytelling to help with the paranoia of not having people making eye contact. If you sit down and watch that film, there's a lot of people talking, not making eye contact.
Yeah.
And in fact, he did something too that's a big no-no in cinema, which is having characters turn away from the camera to deliver their dialogue. Like Childs, when he yells out, Mac wants a flamethrower? He's not even looking at the camera. He's looking back at the character. And this is something that failed with the 2011 remake, which is tons of eye contact, tight eye contact, and people interacting with each other in a way that took away from the paranoia. That's why the sequel is, as much as I enjoyed it, despite the bad CGI, it's nowhere near as good a film as the first film, because it falls down on the paranoia. It ends up becoming like a pit bull kind of alien film where it's attacking. You're afraid where it's going to be, not where it's hiding. And And of course, one of the scenes they complain about is the helicopter scene when the guy starts to transform right in front of the other person, causing the downing of the helicopter. And I heard somebody refer to that as PlayStation quality CGI, and they're right. But that's really not what killed the film. What killed the film was its lack of paranoia within its story, and a lot of the original Thing fans, like myself, that went to see it, were expecting practical effects. Yes, that's true, but it didn't hold together structurally the way the original Thing did when it came to how paranoid everybody was, and including the audience. You didn't know who was it, which is why, like, when I just forgot his name, the fat guy in the first film has a heart attack at Norris. Because I remember it was written as this, that he had an incipient heart condition that the Thing didn't know how to replicate, and that's what caused the heart attack. And one of the things that I've read about the Thing was that he was unaware that he was a Thing.
Yeah.
And
actually, that's to touch on that. I will say that is one thing that the 2011 version did bring across really well, is the fact that the actors, when they undergo their Thing transformations, if you look at their expressions, they look really horrified at what's happening to them. Like they're just passengers in their own body, and they don't have any idea what's going on. It's like all of a sudden they're just like, taking over.
Yeah.
But Esh, what do you think? Your first impression, you're coming at this really, really newer than everybody else, so I'm curious.
4 things. Ew, 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 and ew. I was saying that a lot, and oh my god, it was very graphic, to say the least.
Yes.
But I'm just gonna stop beating around the bush and just say the prequel was for me better than the original. Being young, I've been spoiled to CGI through my whole time watching cinema as I've been around. So I gravitate towards CGI over practical effects anyway. And because I watched both films back to back. And the one thing you did mention earlier, which was the transition between the two films, the dog running scene, I thought that was beautifully done. The prequel, like I said, had an edge for me because I liked the whole exploring the alien ship, discovering what the virus is, what's going on, and then the Thing like infecting everyone and then discovering what's going. Yes, it's the same sort of plot points as what's in the original. It's just a new group of people figuring it out. What's happened and how to combat it, but the CGI like freaked me out more than the practical effects did. Maybe because in my eyes, the practical effects hasn't aged well to the point that CGI has the edge. And the thing that can be done in CG, like the kind of the face morphing looks more refined in the CG than it does practical. I know there's practical limitations to that, but the plot points are like it's a good simple story. Like there's an infection, a virus infects people. They got to figure it out. They got to kill the alien and kill it all off. But it's more than that in the sense that there's atmospheres. People say a lot of in fantasy films, the world building helps the story. The world building of these horror films helped it a lot. The sound design, the lighting, the other things, and like there's nods from the prequels that took things from the original. So like, there was one scene where Kurt Russell walks past an axe in the wall, and in the prequel, one of the characters, there's one of the creatures runs up the wall and he gets a bloody axe and chops it, and it's in the wall. It's the exact same axe when they go and from when they go and visit the old station. So just little things like that really really do it for me, like where the payoffs between the two films. But even though I don't like horror, I don't like the gore, the psychological stuff, I'm getting more into the genre slowly, and I think The Thing, or being what it is, even though it is a cult classic, I did really enjoy it.
Yeah, and I do think that's one thing that the prequel, it kind of had the onus of having to deal with, all of the setups that we saw in the Norwegian base. They had to account for how all that happened in the film. So I don't know if that was a difficulty for the writers or what.
Well, I thought they did that very well, because it's like they looked very closely at what happened at the originals, and then, like you said, they accounted for the details and how things happened and stuff like that. And I like the alien ship stuff, when they went to the alien ship and they discovered how that was happening and going on and all that. See, I think that was one of my favorite bits. Being a sci-fi fan, that was one of my highlights of the prequel.
Okay, and I mean, and that's fine. I don't hate on anybody for liking the prequel or anything like that. I enjoyed the prequel. Not as much as the original, obviously, by no stretch of the imagination, but I still enjoyed it. It's still got a nice place up on my shelf, and I still like to watch the two of them together. So, yeah, I think first impressions are, most of us saw it while we were pretty young, and, that maybe that's part of how it's kind of like buried itself in our subconsciousness is such a great film. The other thing I've noticed is that most of us have seen it in the VHS age, and that's kind of interesting because it's like that's something you don't experience a lot with modern programming. The fact that families usually would get around the VHS and watch the TV, so maybe it's a different experience.
Me and my dad used to collect them all, so
yeah,
we still have a lot of at my dad's place. We still have a lot of them. A lot of collectibles.
Yeah, but I mean, actually going out to the video store and renting it, picking out a film and then coming home and watching it. That's a kind of a family experience that we don't have anymore.
Yeah, I miss those days, man.
Of course, in Gary's case, he actually saw it in the theater. I imagine that had to be some like pants shitting stuff in the theater.
Yeah, it reminded me, because I'm also a fan of the original, The Thing from Another World, the first attempt at it with James Arness as The Thing. And it reminded me that, my dad at about the same age went to see The Thing in the movie theater. And that movie scared the shit out of him. And so we had that shared experience when we talked about it. But I wanted to point out something interesting about the 2011 thing, is that there's actually a semi-hidden nod to the original thing from 1951, which was no. The title for the original film was The Thing from Another World. And then the two modern films used the logo from the original film, which I love that. But no, there's an actual story nod, which is the professor, the scientist, who's heading the expedition is sort of the villain in the film.
Blair?
No, in the 2011 sequel.
Oh.
And I like that they threw that in there, because there was no actual individual villain in the original, in the John Carpenter film. But in the 2011 film, there is the scientist that's heading up the expedition. And that, of course, is a nod to the 1951 film with Dr. Carrington, who was pretty much an antagonist in the film that kept annoying everyone because he kept giving the thing its opportunities to do what it did. And that, of course, is the nod in the 2011 film by making that professor, which I'm trying to remember his name, Professor Halverson, played by Ulrich Thomsen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one thing I can say about the 82 thing. I don't really feel like the thing is a villain. You know, it's a horrific entity, and it's from another world, obviously. But
it's a force, is what it is. It's man versus force.
It is, and this is kind of a good jumping off point for something that several of us in the chat have, or in the panel have talked about before. It wasn't until my college years that I actually started sitting down and reading all of Lovecraft stuff. I just finished all of Howard's stories, and I got into Lovecraft right afterward. And the one that really just stuck out in my mind the most, and the one that probably scared me the most, and probably is my favorite Lovecraft novella ever, is At the Mountains of Madness. And I think it was because I enjoyed The Thing so much, because there are so many similarities between the two that it's, I mean, if Carpenter did not just straight up steal shit from Lovecraft, I mean, okay, yeah, I mean, there's some tangentials. I mean, like they both occur out in frozen hellscapes, basically, where that sense of isolation is just overwhelming, and the despair. But you also have the alien entities themselves. I mean, first there's the elder things, which they're terrifying. I mean, because he comes to the camp and he's found all his guys butchered and all the dogs slaughtered and guys torn to pieces and everything else, crushed up, and he doesn't know what did it except for these alien entities. But then he actually goes into the ancient city itself, and he sees the horror of the immensity of just how small our race is compared to these things and everything that created them. And then, of course, the actual encounter with the Shoggoth, and it's kind of amorphous. I don't know. It's an amorphous creature. It's a thing that could create its own appendages, reach out and absorb things, pretty much, or crush and absorb them, kind of like the Thing does. Yeah. But I don't know. Who else on the panel has actually made the Mountains of Madness connections? I'm curious.
Me.
Yeah, I know you did, Grim, and Valkyrie. Snow, have you read that one yet?
No, I've seen In the Mouth of Madness, another Carpenter film, but I haven't read the book. No.
Yeah, Mountains of Madness. It's a novella.
I read it back in high school, and I made the connection back in high school.
Yeah. See, I didn't make it until I'd actually read it too. I'm curious. I guess we'll go around again. Jace, I know you and Esh probably haven't read that yet.
I haven't read it yet, but I know about it, and I just heard about it, and that's all I know. The small things and stuff.
Purple, what are your connections to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, At the Mountains of Madness came out in 1936. The book that The Thing is based on, Who Goes There, came out in 1938. I think there are definitely connections there, but I think it's more that Lovecraft had a lifelong fascination with Arctic exploration. He loved being able to bring this kind of into his books, and there's definitely, I think, from Campbell's book, you can see the connections, and John Carpenter clearly took a lot of creative ideas from Lovecraft. It's a really good example of cosmic horror in film, something that we don't get very often. It's a hard subgenre, I think, to pull off, but Carpenter really did it very well with this.
Mm-hmm. And I did notice that Weaponized Nerd Rage, he tweeted out yesterday that he'd been checking out a lot of Lovecraft cinema, which I did all my Lovecraft exploration way back when. But he mentioned The Thing as a Lovecraftian horror film himself. So this is not an isolated phenomenon. Obviously, I'm not the only one who thought this. You weren't the only one who thought this. So. Grim, what were your connections?
Well, first though, I think the influence of The Thing, you can see that in the most recent Color Out of Space adaptation with the llamas.
Yes.
That's a good film.
And, I won't spoiler it any more than that. But there are various Thing-like sort of tweaks and touches there. But The Thing only seems to have the intelligence that it borrows, whereas the color seems to have a malevolent and curious intelligence behind it, I think. The connections, though, the main one for me is that Lovecraft very often drew on the emerging science of the time for his stories. So with people exploring the Antarctic, aeroplanes, electricity, heat, the way in which we could suddenly and abruptly get to these places that we couldn't before. So we tame the wilderness, we go into these places where we would not naturally be able to go, and then we encounter something alien that's more than we can cope with, more than we can understand. And I think that theme is there in The Thing, as well as the Mountains of Madness. We've got this base, we're living somewhere where people are not supposed to live. It makes the people dysfunctional, disheveled, irritable, and it becomes routine and boring to be living in this very, very strange place. And then the technology that has enabled them to live there, to have it become boring and ordinary and routine, then introduces this other element, and everyone's out of their depth. So I think that's a theme that runs through it.
Yeah, I would agree. And Gary, did you have anything?
No, just what I said before.
Okay. And for those of y'all out there who maybe are not interested in sitting down to read, a full length, novella by Lovecraft, for whatever reason, it is in public domain. By the way, you can find it pretty easily. Just look for it. I did find these last year, and I was really impressed. This is a manga adaptation by Go Tanabe, and the illustrations are just, they're awesome. They're period accurate, for one thing. And the graphic horror in it is not overstated to the point where it's kind of like, like this is horrific, but it isn't. This is kind of more horrifying than if they had been like bloody, gory, super hyper realistic Japanese over the top gore like you're used to. This is something about this is more frightening than all the manga I've ever read. But there's 2 volumes of it. It's really nicely bound. It's from Dark Horse, so you can pick it up if you're interested. Good stuff. Definitely recommend. Yeah, well, there's some more. There's definitely lots to talk about The Thing. And one thing I do want to share is this is something that I think most of the VHS generation will appreciate. But that wonderful box art by Drew Struzan that just pulls you in.
Yeah.
That's just awesome because it has everything on it. It has like the frozen hellscape-ish type thing, the strange alien angles built into the composition, and then of course the actual facelessness of whatever's under the hood, the thing itself.
I got a great story about this. I actually got yelled at by Drew Struzan a couple weeks ago on Twitter. He was showing off his Thing poster, and I took a snapshot of my Thing poster on the wall, which I have an actual movie poster that was in the movie theater from like 1982 or whatever it was, and I actually paid like $100 for it a while ago on eBay. But anyway, one of my favorite posters, and I showed it to him, and he noticed there was a little bit of sunshine hitting the corner of the poster, and he yelled at me. He's like, "Get that poster out of the sun!" So I immediately moved it. So thank you, Drew Struzan, for putting me in my place, taking care of my thing stuff.
He's awesome. And I should point out that he did this one also, which is stop this one.
I'm a student of Drew Struzan's, and I know him and his wife Dylan personally, and he's like one of the sweetest guys in the world.
Yeah. That is such.
And I have a direct connection to this poster because I'm the one who introduced Charlie Desalarica, Ridley's producer, for the final cut, to Drew Struzan, so that he could do this poster.
Yeah. Now Drew didn't do the original one for Blade Runner. The original movie poster was done by Alan.
We did the comp. He did the comp, which is on the back of the Souvenir magazine, as well as was on the cover of the book for its first printing for Blade Runner, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, until somebody told Warner, we have to take that down and pull it because we didn't pay Drew for that cover. And John Alvin is the one who did the more famous poster for Blade Runner, which is not very good artwork. He did a much better version of it years later before he died.
Yeah. Well, this is the final cut cover that you see, or the director's cut, and I love it. But it's got that classic Drew Struzan, that almost haloed effect that people have, and the way he uses his light and smoke and everything with his airbrush is just amazing.
Well, the thing that he does that I learned from him is he paints in black and white. He uses black and white photography, and all the color he adds back in later. That way, he's able to have control over the tones of the purple hue at the top of this painting to the left, to the more warmer colors coming up from the bottom right.
Mm-hmm. And like a lot of cinema artists, I noticed too, he breaks a lot of the rules because you're not supposed to put orange and blue next to each other, but that's a common movie poster thing.
Yeah, he's one of the first ones to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good.
That's great.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
It's also, it should be pointed out that he broke every rule in doing poster art when he did Big Trouble in Little China, which is probably one of the greatest movie posters of all time.
Mm-hmm. And
he broke every rule in doing it. Oh, agreed. Yeah. It's in my top 5.
Yeah.
Actually, the first top 5 of my favorite films of all time are Ridley Scott and John Carpenter. Nobody else.
Yeah, I could pretty much agree with that. There's so many John Carpenter films that are just awesome. My shelf is full of them.
I'd have to throw James Cameron in that mix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Terminator 2, definitely good.
Aliens.
I'd have to add Toro as well.
But getting back to the thing, we haven't. One of the things that somebody pointed out earlier was, I mentioned the Dread early on. And someone agreed with me, and I think a lot of that is accomplished by that Ennio Morricone soundtrack at the beginning. That song is called Humanity 2, and it's you only ever hear the first part of that, but there is actually that piece of music is pretty long, and it goes into kind of a crazier beat as it goes on. But John Carpenter just using the first part of it, that kind of monotonous, sinister tone contrasted with that bleak Arctic whiteness and stuff. I think it really, it just set up the dread, and the fact that when the film opens, everybody's kind of going through their routines, but you could see like MacReady especially is kind of starting to lose it.
Yeah.
I want to point out that Ennio Morricone only did really the one theme for the film, because everything else that he wrote wasn't used, even though you can get it on the album for the soundtrack.
Yeah.
The rest of it in the film is actually just John Carpenter doing his typical thing, because Ennio was getting very frustrated with trying to score the film for him, because he'd do something and then Carpenter would go in and do some cuts, and so the music that he composed wouldn't match up with what they were doing, and that led to Carpenter just going, "Fuck it, I'll do the soundtrack," and give Ennio Morricone the credit for it. And that's why the film still has that typical John Carpenter slow driving theme to it, because Carpenter oversaw it and in the end scored most of the film himself.
The theme itself is based off a heartbeat and the thought of, it's growing inside of you. The beat definitely keeps a visceral feel to the movie. I love that about the theme of the movie.
Well, there's something interesting, in my opinion, dealing with AIDS at the time in 1982 that is in both The Thing and Blade Runner, because the thing that's killing the replicants is similar to what's taking over the bodies of the people in The Thing. And Carpenter was quite aware of it when he was making the film, that there were associations to the current fears of AIDS, and I think he played on that in the film very well. That helped with the paranoia. The line, everybody's going to need to prepare their own meals, so as not to, if you're infected, you don't infect somebody else, came right out of that era.
Well, that's part of it too. They refer to the thing as like an infection.
Yep.
But he really doesn't. It really doesn't seem to be an infection so much of. It just like takes people over.
Well, that's why they leaned hard towards the blood tests, and going that route right away. That would be your first impression in that type of situation. Is, as a human being, you'd be like, well, this is an infection. We got to check our blood. That's the first place you think to look.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always think it more of a parasite than an infection, something that takes over the host body. Absolutely.
It also re-engineers it, shifts it, changes it, combines it with traits it's taken from other creatures and animals. It's it doesn't have an analog, I don't think.
Yeah, it's one of the questions we asked back in the 80s, Grim, was, what did the original thing look like? And as I got older, I realized the thing is just a cell. It's a single cell organism.
Kind of like an amoeba or something.
Yeah.
That duplicates rapidly. Yeah.
Yeah, they work together, but the blood test shows that when there's a threat, they tear apart and stop working together. What do you think about that, Graham?
It's almost like a horrifically aggressive cancer.
Well, it's almost like a colonial organism, I suppose, more akin to ants or something. They parts act individually, but they also act collectively, arguably with greater intelligence and cunning. I think Esh said he liked the exploration of the ship in the prequel. Yeah. I didn't. I felt that spoilt a lot of the mystery, things I would have liked to have kept unknown. And that was gone. Whereas I loved the going into the ship in Predator 2. I thought that was one of the highlights of that. But in this case, going into the ship itself would have been okay, but finding out things and meeting a sort of original thing in there, I didn't like that. I felt that was far too revelatory.
Ash, you've been kind of quiet, so do you have any comment on any of this? Or?
The blood test scene that you mentioned, and I thought that was geniusly done. It added a lot of suspense to what was going to happen. You were like I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, oh my god, what's going to happen? Like, they're going through the blood test. Everyone's like, everyone's all tied up, and then he's putting the hot wire on in the blood, and then you're just wondering who it's going to be. I thought that was really well done. In terms of the exploring the alien ship, for me it was more, for me personally, I don't like cliffhangers or like unexplained things in films. So I think for me personally, the fact that they explain the origin of the organism, and where it came from, how it got here, and then exploring the alien ship, and then seeing different kinds of extraterrestrial things about this organism, and the fact that they were here the whole time, and and I really like that. But also there's the film that came out recently, Tomorrow War, that at the end of that film there's a scene at the end of the film where they're in Russia, and they're in like the snowy
It was a
area.
huge
Crashed alien
film
ship.
had huge nods. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I saw that, I was like, "That's the thing. You're in a snow biome. You crashed alien ship. You've got an alien entity inside that said ship, and you're trying to get rid of it." And I thought there was huge nods between those two films. But yeah, I mean, like, it was a really The Thing is a really enjoyable film to watch. Scary but enjoyable.
Yeah, I definitely think it was. Everyone would say that it was pretty scary the first time you watch it.
Nah. For me, it's the children movies. Always been since I was young. I was never scared of horror movies or stuff like that. I always laughed, had a good time. I was young.
Well, I mean, it wasn't until years later when I was actually able to acquire a more or a cut of The Thing, which actually included the producer commentary and the behind the scenes and all that. I didn't know how all those special effects were done back then, but I think something that added to the horror in the 1982 version is the camera would linger on these things. All the stuff that was happening, the neck stretching for Norris, the chest caving in, all that stuff. They didn't shoot that stuff like all in the dark. That stuff is all pretty well lit, and you can see all of this stuff happening because it's all practical effects, and it looks really cool.
I love practical effects are the best, I think, man, when you do it right.
And you don't get Uncanny Valley because all the flesh is meant to be distorted and off, so you can linger. Yeah, not hiding the monster, not doing quick cuts. Yeah, that's definitely something different to what we normally see. I mean, I was watching a documentary about the Living Dead trilogy the other day, and God bless Tom Savini, but some of the effects look really ropey if you keep your eye on them for more than about 5 seconds. Not even that, a whole second it would do, but it works in the film because they do a quick cut and then blow the head off with a shotgun or whatever. But the ability to linger and admire the artistry. I met one of the assistants who worked on the effects on the original Thing at a Gen Con some years ago, and unfortunately I can't remember much of what he said, but it was a good conversation, and it was really fascinating.
I got a great question for the panel here. This is a personal fantasy of mine, I guess. May never happen, but since we're about to hit the 40th anniversary of this awesome movie, what do you guys think if they went back in and now with the technology that they have and fixed up a few scenes that Carpenter cut and didn't have the production money for at the time, because we didn't get to see Null's death scene. We didn't really get a very good ending as far as an extended fight between McCready and the final monster because of the animatronics, and I think he used claymation a little bit in that final scene. Yeah. So
they limit that scene.
An extended version of that?
No, I don't think so. No, because one of the other things that inspired John Carpenter was Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. And he wanted that ending to be similar to Agatha Christie's, which is at the end, nobody survives. I don't know if you've read the book or not, but Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, everybody is dead at the end. And you find out who the killer is, but nobody survives. And that's sort of what he wanted to do at the end of this film. And I kind of like that. We don't know if either of them are infected. I highly doubt they are, despite some of the theories of not being able to see the breath. That's simple lighting is why you couldn't see his breath. I mean, he's a human being. He breathes. They were in cold. So clearly he had mist. You can see some of it. It's just simply a trick of the light that you couldn't see it come out of child's mouth. In the end, I think it's very simple. They're going to die. They're doomed. And that's kind of what he wanted to end with, is just not a happy feeling. He wanted that to feel like, well, if the thing survived at all, it's going to be frozen and the world is doomed. Because if they find it...
I agree with the ending. I think that should all stay the same. What I'm saying is, what if they could add in a little bit extra? You know, maybe go back, find some old scenes that he didn't use that he wanted to put in, but he didn't have the money behind it. You know, because when you watch his documentary, he really does discuss that he wish he had a better technology for that final monster fight between him and McCready. That's why he only got the quick couple cut scenes of, yeah, fuck you too, and boom, that's it. That's what I was what you guys want. Yeah,
I would say yes, except for the existence of George Lucas.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think
I
limitations.
don't have Ironcaster here to do George Lucas's response.
I think limitations can be important to the creative process. So I
very much so. Spielberg, Jaws, we saw less of the shark because of their technical issues, and that ended up making it even scarier.
Well, my argument would be Aliens. When Cameron went back and added a bunch of footage to that movie, I felt it really filled it in better and gave it a better story with adding in the beginning of it that he had cut out originally, and like the sentry guns shooting.
That's just filling in a hole in the storyline, and I agree with that. Like if they were just to show Null's death, I'd be fine with showing Null's death, but that's a tightly paced ending, and I think the only thing I would add to that is Null's death, and that's it.
Definitely.
But the way we get Null's death, we know he's dead because he's not responding. And it's so you kind of get the answer that he's gone. We don't see it. We just know that it's happened because where the fuck's he going to go?
Well, there was storyboards drawn out for his death scene originally, but as the movie progressed, they realized their budget. Rob Bottin had pretty much blown his whole budget on the other creature effects that they just didn't have it in the budget to finish. So I just wish in my head that they could go and find a few things to throw in just to give it a little more magic for the 40th anniversary, a director's cut or something, special edition, blah, blah, blah. And it wouldn't have to necessarily be the quintessential, holy grail of the thing. That I think the original film would always be that, but just something fun for the fans where you'd be like, well, what if this scene got thrown in? What would you think? Type of deal. I don't know. I guess I just always want more. And I know Carpenter's involved with a possible sequel / remake that's going on with Blumhouse. I don't know if you guys if we're going to touch on that at all, but
I heard about it. But.
It's in the works. I know he's involved.
I don't trust Jason Blum. I think he's a bit of a twat. So
the computer game, the old computer game, is meant to be semi-canonical and to give more information. And there was some sequels.
I enjoyed that game. I own that game, Grim. I love that game.
Was it PlayStation 2?
Yeah, it's PlayStation 2.
I got the PC version.
Yeah,
I played the PC version, and I still have it on my computer. And I every once in a while I'll bounce out and I'll go play that.
Yeah. I used to play it on PlayStation 2 and Xbox. I used to own that once.
But it's got
Go on.
No. You go ahead, Grim.
I was going to say there's also some non-canonical sequel comics where you find out what happens to them. So
But it's
the
as
comics,
closely
yeah.
related to the 1951 film too, because they even called it The Thing from Another World. I think it was Dark Horse that did that back in 1990, 1989, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's from the book, isn't it? And there was an even earlier film called Who Goes There, which is pretty hard to find.
I've never even heard of that.
It barely
Really?
resembles the book or the films. I haven't located a copy of it yet. I will keep looking.
Yeah,
I'm looking now.
That game was hard as hell. That's all I gotta say about that. I was
It was a
so
fun
hard.
game. It was a fun game.
Great
Yeah,
game.
I kept dying.
Yeah, I'd always run out of health. At the end, like I wouldn't have enough to
finally-
get through it.
I finally finished and completed the game, and then you see the helicopter, and there's McCready, and it's the big boss battle, and I thought that was really fucking cool.
Yeah, McCready comes and picks you up in the helicopter. It's a good ending.
Yep,
he is the chopper pilot.
it's
I
the
don't know,
chopper.
Yeah, that one thing that I should mention on this one. Gary's death in the film. Gary's the guy with the pistol, played by Donald Moffat. He did a great job on this. He does a great job on everything he did. But a lot of people kind of laugh about his, the face stretching thing with him and Wilford Brimley. But to me, that one is always really horrifying. Because it just,
When his fingers go into his face, it's like fuck, fuckity fuck.
Yeah, what do you do?
Forced assimilation. It was almost like a rape. It was really horrifying to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
I thought
it
that
makes
was
sense,
honestly one of
too.
the scariest things.
That would probably be one of the fastest ways he could, penetrate and not to use such a graphic word, but get inside of him, so to speak.
Yeah, and I noticed they did the same thing with the prequel too, when the guy's arms drop off and it grabs, Chris Hivju by the face and basically starts assimilating him.
Poor guy in that scene.
Found it. It's Horror Express. Actually, it's 1972.
Oh yeah. I fucking love that movie. So it's also based on it?
It's very loosely based on Who Goes There.
Wow.
So it's got Cushing in the
that
lead,
movie.
and it's on a train. And it's kind of ropey and silly, and barely resembles the thing or Who Goes There, but it was adapted from it. So
I didn't know that, and I own that damn movie.
I haven't been able to find
That
a
movie-
copy.
I found it through Pirate Bay. Shh.
I
Do
see.
not endorse pirating here. You have to.
What about
Most
privateering?
movies are racist. Arr.
Arr. There you go.
Lamo is a pirate most of the times.
Oh, Esh, is your time up?
Yeah, I do need to head out now.
I am sorry, man.
No
thank you
worries.
for-
I wish I could stay longer because it's a great conversation, but family obligations. So,
I understand.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Thanks for making time to hang out with us, man.
No worries.
I kind of wish you'd gotten to speak a little bit more, but
No, we can always do a part two later down the line.
yeah,
Then
that's always
we can focus on the prequel.
maybe we should. I don't know. There's a lot of divided opinion on that one. But,
Yeah.
all right, man.
Right
You
then.
Take care.
Everyone.
Bye. Ash.
See ya.
Take
Take
care.
care, Ash.
Right.
Yeah, we're at the 1 hour mark. And I'm fine with time, but if any of y'all have some time constraints, just let me know and we'll.
I've got a half hour.
You got about a half hour? Okay. So we'll probably wrap it up by then. We could talk about each and every. Okay, this is something I didn't ask the panel, and I meant to. We saw lots of different thing forms throughout the film.
We did.
So I'm gonna ask, which thing was your favorite? For me, I got to say the Norris monster, because it was just, I mean, it was just so insane. I mean, you know, it had teeth in its chest. It, you know, shit shot out of there and formed another monster. Then the head, you know, formed another monster. And I mean, it was just crazy. Jace?
I think I have to say the same as you on that one, man. I think I need to say the same. Yeah. That was crazy.
Yeah, it was just crazy monster. Purple?
Yes. So I agree with you on that. The same here.
I'm going to have to agree, but I do have a soft spot for the head crab, just to see it disappear behind McCready's shoulder when you're focused on him, to see it crawl across the floor. That really disturbed me.
And Palmer says, "You've got to be fucking kidding me."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I consider that part of the Norris monster, though. So you're a Norris one. Snow?
Yes.
Yeah, the Norris monster is great. You got to tip your hat to Rob Bottin. I'm not sure how he actually pronounces it, but he just came off The Howling after that, I believe, and he kind of just dropped into some luck with John Carpenter, and I think he got to do a little spot in what was that one where there are ghosts coming off the ship or whatever.
The Fog.
The Fog, yeah, and so he jumped from that right into the thing, but he actually went to the hospital for working so hard on these monsters, and I really wish he was still around. He retired a while ago. I think the last thing he did was Game of Thrones or something like
he
that.
disappeared.
Yeah, he just
disappeared. Left. Nobody. There's an entire group dedicated. I'm in the group.
Are you?
Where the fuck is Rob Bottin?
That's what I would like to know. We've been looking for him forever.
He just disappeared. He doesn't respond to interview requests.
Right.
He's done. He's done.
It's sad.
But it's true. It wasn't just exposure to chemicals, because they were using things they probably shouldn't have been using and burning.
Sure.
And it led to him being hospitalized, making the thing.
Yeah.
He was sleeping on the soundstage, you know, and just God, man, his life was hell making that movie. So I always tell people, you know, you don't get that kind of dedication in filmmaking anymore like Rob Bottin did.
Yeah,
and I think
Cameron
he was only
did the same
20 something. He was really young too.
He was a kid. You know, he was a student of Rick Baker's, and ironically, the movie that Rick Baker was supposed to do, The Howling, and he stepped away to go do American Werewolf in London instead. And so a lot of people are like, look at all the similarities. I'm like, well, of course there are similarities, because Rick Baker had done some of the work already. Rob Bottin took it over.
Right.
And so the transformation scenes are very similar with using bladders and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Bottin is like the great abuser of fucking bladders, because like, I mean, oh my god, he will use bladders to the point where you're like, okay, stop it, Rob, stop it. It's really distracting at this point, but I fucking love it. You know, the stuff he did
on there's a credit for him on one of the Game of Thrones episodes. I do know that. So he has.
Yeah, it was when the king gets killed. And he was somehow involved with some of the makeup on that. And after that, he was done. He didn't do anything else. But you know, his bladder effects went way overboard with Total Recall. Even with the first film, The Howling, when we get the big close-ups of the transformation in the doctor's office, it was just the bladders were ridiculous, because they were like cheekbones. It's like, it looks like a bladder. It doesn't look like bone. So stop it, Rob. Stop. But still, he's a student of Rick Baker, and he worked along with Rick Baker on a lot of films, including for Roger Corman, because that's where he cut his teeth, was on Roger Corman films. And Bottin is just one of the greatest. Him and Stan Winston are two of my favorite makeup guys, followed by, of course, Rick Baker, and on down the line to The Exorcist. Just The Thing was mind-bogglingly good with what he did. He was mixing elements, like I said, some of them toxic, to get when Norris's neck stretches.
Yeah, that green.
There was
shit.
so much toxic shit in that, and then they have a fire. Yeah, it had a fire, and everybody had to evacuate because it was just so dangerous. But god damn it looks so good.
It does. But Snow, I asked you what was your favorite thing monster though in the film?
Oh, sorry, I went off on a tangent there. Yeah, I all the Bottine effects were great, but the one that paralyzed me was the first one, and that was Stan Winston with the dog. I mean,
dog monster.
When the face splits open,
and
it starts grabbing the other dogs. You know, me being a kid when I first seen it. That was before I threw the blanket over my head. So yeah, that one, it stuck with me for years and years. That scene stuck with me.
That's an insane scene, though.
That one is pretty horrible. I've after watching it so many times, I've actually kind of figured out all the different shit that it was doing in that film. I mean, it didn't dawn on me at first that whatever it was spraying all over the dog was acidic or anything.
Oh yeah, it was doing 4 things at once.
It was infecting tentacles. The spray was for infecting, and the spray was made out of the same stuff that's in Twinkies.
Yeah, it's made out of the same shit that's in Twinkies. It is. I remember. Yeah. Well, Gary, what was your favorite?
Oh, the same as purple. Norris's fucking head with the spider legs. I mean,
that's all part of the Norris monster. So.
Yeah, it's just that creature effects there. The way it leans out to take a peek from under the desk, taking off running. Well, y'all are doing that. I'm going to try to escape.
And then
it was fucking great.
And then when they turn around to look at it, it just kind of stands there like, well, fuck. just before it gets torn.
I just sort of stopped saying, it's sort of like, the alien version of it going, oh, hey, guys.
Hey, I was just going to go this way. You mind?
That's just me. So I'm going to go out for a smoke.
That and the tongue that shoots out, that kind of pulls itself along. It's like, oh my god. I can't.
And the use of
the use of the
things make. Oh man!
They added the sound of locust into that.
Yeah,
and they changed it. They augmented it, and it's so creepy.
Yeah, the ADR on that film is fucking unbelievable.
Normally I poke fun at Carpenter's sound effects guys because he's notorious for using spaghetti western gun sounds, which is just awful. His guns just always sound stupid, but the audio on the thing is just spot on perfect.
It is good. Grim, what was your favorite?
Definitely the head crab, because it's where we see the true power of the thing's ability to morph and change flesh, because it doesn't just explode into a mass of tentacles or mash a bunch of people together. It's the closest we get to it using a full animal form, like it did at the beginning with the dog. Yeah, it forms itself into a crab. And as we now know today, nature keeps turning things into crabs, so it makes sense.
But the whole Norris scene is just golden. That's my favorite part.
And once again, I got to pull from Mountains of Madness because so much of the Elder Things and the Shoggoths in that book were pseudopoded or tentacled in some way, especially the Shoggoths, because they could extend portions of their bodies to become like pseudopods or whatever for manipulating or whatever they needed to do. And that whole, everyone's always had this kind of innate dread of tentacles or arms in the case of an octopus. And I don't know, man. And maybe it's just the idea that this thing would have like some cold, clammy appendage just wrapping around you or something. The scene where he grabs I can't remember his name, but Windows leaves for a second and he comes back in and you can see him being pretty much digested and pulled away. I had it in the opening.
And Bennings.
Bennings, yeah.
That's
God,
Bennings.
man, that was horrific.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And of course, he was miserable doing that scene because that was actually shot where it was really fucking cold.
Yeah, and he was naked, basically.
Yeah, it was a last minute change in what they wanted to do, and they pulled that scene together quickly. And he sat there shirtless, and it was fucking freezing.
Too bad he's not a Norwegian.
That's just the
We're
creepiness
used to it.
and it's amazing how creepy and how John Carpenter gets in your mind with the whole intimacy of being, basically raped by this thing, because it rips your clothes off and then it penetrates you. So he gets to the subconscious with you and your some of your darkest fears of being taken over by not just another person, but a monster. You know what I mean? So that's the genius that Carpenter used in this movie to really get into the psyche of what.
And I brought that up earlier that when he does the face thing, Blair does with Gary. Absolutely, it's meant to subconsciously traumatize you and remind you of forced, someone being sexually forced against their will and taken over. It's fucking terrifying. I still consider it. It'll always be my number 2 favorite film of all time.
Yeah,
and I watch it religiously.
Yeah, me too. And I actually watched the prequel along with it too, just because
it's always in my top 3 for when people ask for what's the scariest movie ever out there. It's that one and usually Exorcist, and there's a few that fall in that 3 slot, but number 1 or 2 is always The Thing or The Exorcist. Will scare the shit out of you,
especially when you're young and impressionable.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's one of the things about The Thing that makes it so horrifying is the fact that it violates you, and it doesn't do it maliciously. It just does it because it's trying to survive. It's like any kind of virus, I guess. It's basically trying to propagate itself, and it just happens to use you as its genetic material.
Yep.
I think it hits a chord as well, as was mentioned, because you can find parallels in nature. There are worms, there are insects that will take over a host body and cause them, to basically become zombies.
In order to propagate itself, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, that's horrific.
Like those parasites that get into snails, and the way they spread is that after they've taken over the host, they put themselves in the eye of the thing, the snail that they take over, and they create this pattern in the eyes of blinking different colors that causes the birds to come down and eat them and then shit them out and spread them to the next snail. And it just keeps the cycle going.
Jack of all casuals asks, so whatever happens to the people it takes over, did they die or are they still there somewhere? Well, that's the thing. In the original, and in the sequel and in the prequel, I guess, it's like we really don't know. It seems like people don't know that they're infected, and until whatever it is just rips out and reveals itself. And then, like I said, the prequel did a really good job of conveying the horror that these people had at just suddenly realizing that they had actually been harboring the thing all along. But yeah, whatever it's
Carpenter alludes to a possible knowledge, because like Palmer has that look when he's about to do the blood test, and Palmer kind of looks down like, what? The jig is up.
Yep.
Yes, I'd probably say that as well with Childs, because at the end, obviously, we've just got him and McCready left, and McCready offers him a drink, and you just see that little smile. I think what he offered him was a Molotov cocktail to drink from. So I think the thing is there inside the person, and there is some sort of awareness. Absolutely.
Maybe.
That's a maybe, because he was drinking off the bottle right before Childs got there. So that's a hard one to figure out if he did that or not. I've always liked the idea that they just both sat there and froze to death, and or if you're going to have a sequel, somebody finds them. You know, the helicopter gets the distress signal, they just weren't able to reply, because if Windows was in there pushing out, you know, the distress signal for, you know, a few hours at least, there's a possibility somebody heard it and just couldn't respond. You know, so I always thought there was a window open to revisit these two characters, and they kind of did in the comic book series. If you looked at that at all,
Yep.
That's kind of what happened in the comic book, because they picked them both up, and I believe it was Childs that was the one that was infected in the comics.
And that's
It
something
was.
that's something that's probably very 80s ish. Okay, besides from the feeling of isolation, that is something that I have noticed a lot of horror movie directors over the last 20 years. They've been setting their films earlier and earlier in time, and it's definitely time before we had lots of telecommunications and lots of cell phones. If they were to do like a modern day reinterpretation of the thing, you know, we have satellites that can, you know, read a dime, can read the date on a dime, you know, laying out on a beach or something somewhere. You know, we've got cellular technology that can, you know, reach all across the world pretty much instantly.
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder if the thing would have as much of an impact with everybody having access to this kind of technology now. I mean, would the isolation still be there?
Isolation could still be there in the Antarctic, because it's still a very tough place to survive in, even to this day. The habitats are better today than they were back in the 80s, but you still got to go outside.
Mm-hmm.
And some things don't work down there if you don't take good care of them. I think it works. It's always got to be the Antarctic, because it is such a harsh environment.
Mm-hmm. It's what worked for Mountains of Madness, is the fact that it was Antarctica, and at that time it was such a remote, unknown location that was unexplored, and it was kind of scary and isolated, and it worked for the thing.
I think you could do a remake taking into account all that technology. So the first sort of incident happens, and they send out a call for help, and then it gradually becomes obvious that this thing cannot be allowed to get out ever. And so that countdown to when help comes becomes a countdown to when this thing gets into the world. And you use that as the sort of standing threat. So we either eradicate it or we have to make people leave. And then you end with the last survivor using a flamethrower on the helicopter that comes to rescue him or something to ensure that the thing can't get out. Mm. And that's the way I would do it.
Yeah, that would definitely make a bigger statement on it, the fact that somebody's actually sacrificing themselves. And hello, Tim Possible. Good morning. How are you?
I will say this, that Ronald D. Moore was set to do a remake or sequel to the thing for the Sci-Fi Channel that eventually evolved into that series about a disease that he made. I can't even remember what the hell the name of it was. Helix.
Yeah.
Helix evolved from the thing. And when the show started, it was really fucking good. The first 4 or 5 episodes, and then after that, it just sort of went downhill and lost its steam. But that isolation was still part of it, and I liked the first 4 to 5 episodes of the Helix because it felt like the thing.
Yeah, there's so many good themes that make the thing horrifying. It's the isolation, the violation, the fact that you're dealing with an alien entity that really doesn't have feelings so much as just kind of like a need to stay hidden and a willingness to kill people in order to do it and spread itself. I don't know. Maybe what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's definitely something that has intelligence, but it's that cunning intelligence. It's not an intelligence that you could reason with. And I think that's where the fear comes from. This isn't something that you could kind of negotiate with. This is something that only does what it does to survive. It's, as you say, not doing it because it's malicious. It's acting on instinct.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like at no point do they ever, stop and think about trying to question it itself.
Yes.
I mean, they don't really ever get any opportunities in either one of the movies because the thing's usually pretty aggressive.
That's what it varies from the black and white film from the 50s as well, because we do get that scene where the Doctor is trying to desperately reach this thing, make a breakthrough, and it just slaps him aside. It doesn't want to, talk to him.
I don't want to talk to you.
I think one of the saddest things of the 51 film is that they actually did design it to be a tentacled creature. And the producer, director, Howard Hawks, was like, people aren't going to be afraid of that little squid. They want something big, behemoth. And it's because of him that we got James Arness as the walking giant alien.
Carrot.
The carrot. Yes.
Carrot. The carrot.
Yep.
Oh, wow. I kind of what Hawks would think of the 1982 version.
Am I remembering incorrectly that there's a scene where it's trying to put a machine together, though? Like an abomination.
Well, in the 82 one, yeah, it's trying to rebuild Blair.
Yeah, it's building a ship. Blair's building a miniature saucer for one person.
So that does suggest it has intelligence and capability and could hypothetically be reasoned with.
We don't know why it crashed that ship in the first place.
It probably looks at as every organism besides itself as inferior. Like, we're probably animals, livestock, monkeys, whatever. We're nothing compared to what it thinks. You know what I mean?
Because one interpretation is that the thing infected the pilot of the UFO, and that's what caused it to crash.
That's what got passed down from since '82, is that the ship was crashing because the thing was taking over the pilot.
Yeah. So that would also, in that scenario, it would be absorbing the knowledge of the technology in order to try and get away, which again suggests intelligence. There is that rewrite of the thing from the thing's point of view where it's just trying to be friendly and understand humans.
Oh my God. I just want to be part of you.
Yeah. And it just doesn't understand how they're stuck in a single form and how it's killing them and so on. But the best adaptation is clearly the Thingu one with Pingu.
Oh my God.
For the longest time, I'd never seen that, and then somebody showed it to me.
I've never seen it. I don't even know what you're talking about. I gotta find it.
So good. So good.
Well,
Thingu.
We're almost at our half-hour mark, but I'm going to read you this one little section from Mountains of Madness that I think relates to this.
Okay.
These creatures were not evil things, only men of another age and another order of being. Radiates, vegetables, monstrosities, star spawn, whatever they had been, they were men, awoken in the cold of an unknown epoch, disturbed and assaulted by furred, barking quadrupeds, and by the white simians with their strange tools and bizarre clothing. Poor Lake, poor Gidney, and poor old ones. Scientists to the last, what indeed had they done that we would not have done in their place? So I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of a correlation with the thing on that. The fact that it is so alien and so different that it, maybe Snowdub has a point. It does view itself as so far above whatever it's taking over that it, has no consideration of it.
I've got a pitch for a sequel. So it's in the far frozen north, which is the same place that they dumped the blob. Right?
Uh-huh.
So they both get thawed out by global warming, and you have Thing versus Blob.
I'd have to go to the Blob on that one.
You reckon?
Yeah, because it engulfs, and the 80s version of the Blob was horrific, man. Jesus, the way it was just digesting people.
that's one of the few cases where the sequel's better than the original, which is also true of The Thing. So yeah, more similarities.
Oh yeah, the '80s version of The Blob is a much better film.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's.
But as I recall, it's not an alien in that film; it's man-made.
Yeah, it
was
comes off a
created by
satellite,
Carpenter.
doesn't it?
Yep.
Well, it comes off a satellite, but yeah, but it's not
I
really
think
man-made.
though that I think that it was something that was being made on the satellite. Because you've got that one scientist that's looking for it. That's kind of the creator villain of the film.
I had to go back and watch it. I don't remember catching that part. I mostly was, too busy watching people getting devoured by this thing and skeletonized and shit.
Yeah, the single best one is the kid when he's reaching for her and the blob starts pulling and his face starts stretching backwards. And it was a real person underneath that slime. It was really well done. That freaked me out.
Yeah, some good special effects. And I mean, that's one of the things I think the practical effects are always going to be better. Just because there's something physical for actors to interact with. Plus, no disrespect to Esh, because I know he loved the prequel, but when you look at the CG in that, granted it's 2011 CG, I don't know what 2021 CG, how much better it could be by comparison, but
Look,
something
Esh,
about
Esh is just wrong. He's too young, doesn't know his own mind. He's just wrong.
The thing with particle effects is that it's so personal. It has the magic, and it's personal, and it's so different.
Yeah.
That's why I love it. Love that the most.
Yeah, the CG just seems so kind of cold. I mean, even when the thing is killing people and you see them getting stabbed and run through and all that stuff, it still looks more artificial than a latex monstrosity with bladders and shit. Yeah.
And hoses, air hoses. Don't forget those. That's how you get that whipping tentacle effect.
Yeah. God, those whipping tentacles. Oof.
Kinky.
Some days ago, I watched the Sleepaway Camp, the first one.
Oh,
it's such a good one, and the effects, like when the guy gets burnt with the fry thing, and just the way they made that is so good. The practical effects, they're so amazing. How the movie is with practical effects, especially on that scene. There's just something, I don't know, man. The feels are so much better when you see it like that.
Yeah, that's probably going to be an eternal debate, but with filmmakers these days, is which is better, practical effects or CG. For most of us who, I think, grew up in the '80s and got to watch all the what I consider to be good cinema, we're probably always going to go with the practical effects, just because that's what we grew up with, that's what we like. But for guys like Esh who are young and they've mostly grown up on the CG, they're probably always going to like the CG and they'll just adapt to it. I don't know.
But it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, because certainly if we took a look back at like 1950s, special effects, we'd be going like, oh my god, that looks cheesy.
Yeah, it can be hard to understand how anyone was scared.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm still trying to figure out why people are scared of horror movies and games and whatever.
Fear is personal. It's kind of like whatever the things that scare you are, in your subconscious, and whatever it is in the film that evokes that same sensation of fear is what brings it out. And it just so happens a lot of people fear a lot of the same things. Once again, the Thing with its violation, I don't think anybody I know would, be comfortable with that. There's nobody that just stands up and says, "Oh yeah, I enjoy being violated. It's my thing." It's like, have you seen a psychiatrist?
Well, that depends. That's a topic for another day. No,
yeah, I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know, but I mean, I think what works about the nature of fear is the unknown, and is the fear of having something take you over, take you down, invade your personal space, or otherwise interfere with your functions.
Yeah, I can see that point. I can see it. Yeah.
But well, it's 10:30, guys. Let's get around to some closing remarks.
Yeah.
Snow, what you got for me?
I could talk about The Thing all night, all day for weeks. I love this movie. I believe it's probably the greatest masterpiece ever put to film. It's hard for me to find other movies that compare to it. It's done so well for what it's trying to get across. The paranoia is so beautifully done. The only thing I could maybe compare it to, and I still feel it's a little inferior, but still close, would be like Alien from Ridley Scott. And personally, now that I know that Blumhouse and John Carpenter are together in working out a possible sequel, if you're going to do it right, you're not going to be able to replicate what has been done before. So do what James Cameron did. You take a great movie and you bump it up to the next level. You go in, you get Keith David, you get John Carpenter, you put it 40 years later. They go back to Antarctica to find something with a big military team and a bunch of scientists, and they just find out it doesn't matter because the Thing's still going to kick their ass. There's a story here that you could make and make a great movie if you do a sequel to the Thing. But if not, don't try to reproduce something that can't be reproduced, because this was magic in a bottle and lightning in a bottle, and it got caught once and once only. So yes, I enjoy this movie, and I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to talk about it, guys, because it's an awesome movie.
I agree. Jace?
I couldn't say it better than Snow, to be honest.
he pretty much, I think he encompasses a lot of what we
Yeah,
Gary, you have any closing remarks on this?
Just like I said before, it's my second favorite film of all time. That's never going to change. Blade Runner and The Thing are always going to be number one and number two. Nothing will ever supersede them. That's it. The Thing is brilliant, and I just love how it plays on so many classic themes from, as you mentioned, At the Mountains of Madness, as well as Agatha Christie. Because it is a murder mystery. You're trying to figure who's the killer, who's infected. I love the film. It's a whodunit and with horror.
I agree. Purple?
Absolutely. This is probably my top 5, always has been. Whenever I get to recommend it to people, they say, what's a great horror movie to watch? I say, watch The Thing. As we've said throughout the show, if you're not afraid of something like the fear of violation, then it's the fear of isolation, it's the paranoia, it's the fact that people will turn on each other so quickly. And I think it portrays it brilliantly in this film, and the use of the special effects just kind of is the cherry on the top for it. If we did ever get a director's cut, I would be very curious to see the scenes that were missing, or the scenes that they couldn't film because of budgetary constraints. But I am very wary about this new one coming from Blumhouse, because I'm just not a fan of them. I'm sorry.
I'm right there with you, Purple. Jason Blum is kind of an absolute douche nozzle. I can't stand the guy.
Well, I will watch it, but yeah, I'm gonna wait. Before I say anything about it, I don't want to go into it with any preconceptions about if it's gonna be good, bad, whatever, based on who's on it. I figure let's just let it stand on its own and see if it's any good. And Grim?
Final thoughts. My main thought whenever I watch this film is, what the fuck was wrong with the critics at the time who just didn't seem to get it and understand it? It's all the things that they should like. It's shot well, it's experimental, it's cerebral, and yet they all just kind of dismissed it as a gore fest. So I wonder what was wrong with them.
Yeah, because Roger Ebert was right up in there calling it gore porn.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, did you not see the rest of the movie that's not gory?
Everybody
just
was
saw the gory
running off
parts.
they were all running off the nostalgia of Spielberg and E.T. at the time and Friendly Aliens. So it wasn't with yeah.
I got to tell you, that is the film that killed The Thing and Blade Runner, both, was E.T. It took all the box office. Everybody kept wanting to go see that movie. I went to see it with my dad and my girlfriend. And my dad and I both fucking hated E.T. I'm like, what a stupid fucking insipid film. And, it represents Jesus Christ with the heart and the finger. Oh, fuck you. Just garbage filmmaking. And it killed The Thing and Blade Runner, which makes me hate it even more.
Yeah.
Definitely a kid's film. Definitely.
Yeah. And that film, I notice, has not stood the test of time as well as The Thing.
Oh, no. And then, of course, Spielberg changing all the guns to walkie-talkies. He's such a twant.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
All
Did he
right.
really? I didn't know that. Jesus.
All right, everyone. Thank you all very much for joining me. I've got all your channels plugged into the actual description, and of course, my mods have been pumping them out throughout the thing. So, everybody, thank you all very much for agreeing to come and hang out with me and talk about The Thing. Yeah, this is definitely my second favorite film, and we're gonna talk about my first favorite film a little bit later with Gary and hopefully Grim. Because we're going to be talking about Blade Runner a little bit later today. But
and we're going to have a special guest.
Yeah, it'll be a good show, I think.
Nice.
So I hope you'll catch us for that one. And thank y'all for hanging out with us for this hour and a half.
No, this has been great. Thank you.
Always, man.
All right, y'all take care. Have a good rest of your day.
Tuck and roll.
Tuck and roll.